Commander Zethra stood at the observation deck of the orbital station, watching her world die. The red sun of Velthera hung in the dark sky like a dying ember, barely giving enough light to see the planet below. Once, her people had built great cities under this sun. Now those cities were empty shells, their people gone or waiting for evacuation ships that might never come. She pressed her pale hand against the cold metal wall. Through her thin skin, blue veins showed like tiny rivers. This was how the Kethmari were built, delicate on the outside, but strong in ways others could not see. Her people did not need thick muscles or hard bones like the warrior races of the galaxy. They had minds that could solve problems no other species could understand. But the Galactic Confederation did not care about clever minds anymore. They wanted soldiers. They wanted ships that could blow up planets. They wanted races that could fight and kill and conquer. The Kethmari had none of these things. So when their sun began to die and they asked for help, the galaxy simply stopped. "Listening, Commander," a voice said behind her. Zethra turned to see her aide, Moron, floating toward her. The young Kethmari moved carefully in the low gravity, his long limbs graceful despite their fragile appearance. "The last transport is ready to leave, but it can only take 5,000 more people." 5,000. Zethra felt her heart sink. There were still 2 million Kethmari left on the planet below. The math was simple and terrible. Their sun would go dark in less than a year. The evacuation ships they had built could not save everyone. The Confederation had promised to send help, but those promises had turned into delays, then excuses. Then silence. "Have we heard anything from the Council?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Mor-Ann's eyes dimmed. This was how the Kethmari showed sadness. Their large, dark eyes would lose their inner light. "Nothing, Commander. The last message was 3 months ago. They said our request was being reviewed." Reviewed? What was there to review? Her people were dying. Their world was dying. But to the Confederation, the Kethmari were just one more weak species that could not protect itself. Not worth saving. Zethra walked to her desk and picked up a small crystal cube. Inside the crystal, ancient symbols glowed with soft blue light. This was one of the oldest artifacts of her people, a star map made thousands of years ago when the Kethmari first learned to travel between worlds. Back then, they had been explorers, visiting distant stars, and cataloging new forms of life. They had been peaceful then, just as they were now. She activated the crystal with a touch of her finger. The symbols rearranged themselves, showing a map of the galaxy. Most of the stars were marked with the symbols of Confederation members. The proud warrior races, the advanced technical civilizations, the ancient empires that ruled huge sections of space. But there, in a small corner of the map, was something different. A yellow star with a small blue planet. The symbols next to it were old, written in a language that few still remembered. Zethra had studied the ancient texts so she could read. The planet was called Earth, and it was home to a species called humans. According to the old records, they were a young race, barely out of their home system when the Kethmari explorers had visited them thousands of years ago. The notes were brief but interesting. The humans were not particularly strong or smart compared to other races. They had no special abilities, no advanced technology, no great empire. They were, by all measurements, ordinary. But there was one thing that had caught the attention of the Kethmari explorer who had written the report. The humans had something called compassion. The word was hard to translate. It meant caring for others, even when those others could give nothing in return. The explorer had watched humans risk their lives to save strangers. He had seen them share food with enemies. He had observed them working together to solve problems instead of fighting over resources. It was strange behavior, the explorer had written. Most species only helped their own kind. But humans seemed to help anyone who needed it. Zethra stared at the blue dot on the map. Could it be true? Was there really a species that helped others just because it was the right thing to do? The Confederation certainly did not work that way. In the Confederation, you were useful or you were forgotten. The strong survived, and the weak were left behind. "Commander," Moran said quietly, "what should I tell the transport captain?" She looked at him, seeing the hope and fear in his dim eyes. He was barely an adult, with decades of life ahead of him if they could find a way to survive. She thought of all the other young Kethmari still on the planet, waiting for rescue that would not come. Then she looked back at the crystal map, at the small blue world that might be their only chance. "Tell him to prepare for a long journey," she said. "We are not going to the inner worlds." Moran looked confused. "Commander, where are we going?" Zethra touched the crystal again, and the image of Earth grew larger. It was a beautiful world, with blue oceans and white clouds and green continents. It looked peaceful. It looked like the kind of place where someone might actually care about refugees from a dying world. "We are going to find out if an old story is true," she said. "We are going to Earth." The decision was made quickly after that. Word spread through the orbital stations and the remaining cities on Velthara. They were not going to wait for the Confederation anymore. They were not going to beg for help from people who saw them as worthless. They would take their chances with the humans, these strange beings who supposedly helped others for no reason. Evacuation ships were loaded with everything the Kethmari could carry. Not just people, but their history, their science, their art. Ancient libraries were packed into data crystals. Seeds from Velthara's dying gardens were frozen for planting on new soil. Children were told stories of their homeworld, so they would remember where they came from. Zethra stood on the bridge of the lead ship as they prepared to leave. Through the view screen, she could see Velthara turning slowly below them. The red sun cast everything in shades of orange and brown. Soon, that sun would go dark forever, and Velthara would be nothing but a cold rock floating in space. But her people would survive. They had to. And if the old stories were true, if the humans really were as compassionate as the ancient explorer had claimed, then maybe the Kethmari would find something they had lost when the galaxy abandoned them. Maybe they would find hope dot the ships. Engines came to life with a deep hum. Around them, the other evacuation vessels were also preparing to depart. 12 billion souls were putting their faith in an old star map and a story about aliens who helped strangers. It seemed impossible. It seemed foolish, but it was all they had left. "Set course for Earth," Zethra commanded. "Take us to the humans." Ships turned away from their dying sun and flew toward the unknown, carrying the last hope of the Kethmari people into the vast darkness between the stars. Admiral Sarah Chun was drinking her morning coffee when the alert came through. She nearly dropped her cup when she read the message on her tablet. 47 alien ships had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, and they were not moving. Like an invasion force, they were limping. "Ma'am, we need you in the command center right away," Lieutenant Torres said over the comm system. His voice had that tight edge that meant something big was happening. Sarah had heard that tone before, usually right before everything went sideways. She grabbed her uniform jacket and hurried through the corridors of Luna Station. The moon base had been humanity's first major space facility, built when they were still figuring out how to live among the stars. Now it served as Earth's primary defense and communication hub. If aliens were coming to visit, this was where they would make contact first. The command center was buzzing with activity. Officers sat at glowing screens, tracking the alien ships as they moved slowly through space. Sarah could see the worry on their faces. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. and they were still considered newcomers by most other species. Unannounced visits usually meant trouble. "Report," Sarah said as she took her position at the central command. "Console. 47 vessels, Admiral," Torres replied, pulling up a display on the main screen. "They appeared about an hour ago near the outer planets. Our sensors show significant damage to most of the ships. Hull breaches, failing life support, engines running on emergency power." Sarah studied the images. The ships were beautiful in a strange way, all curves and flowing lines, like they had been grown rather than built. But Torres was right about the damage. She could see dark scars along their hulls, sections that looked like they had been patched with whatever materials the builders could find. "Any communication attempts?" she asked. "They started transmitting as soon as they entered our space," said Communications Officer Park. "It took our computers a while to figure out their language, but we finally got a translation. They say they are refugees seeking sanctuary. They want to talk to our leaders, refugees." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In her experience, when entire fleets of aliens showed up calling themselves refugees, it usually meant something very bad was happening elsewhere in the galaxy. Something bad enough to make people abandon their homes and travel across space. "Looking for help. Do we know who they are?" she asked. Park typed commands into his console, and new information appeared on the screen. "According to our databases, they call themselves the Kethmari. They were members of the Galactic Confederation until about 5 years ago. After that, the records get fuzzy." Sarah knew about the Galactic Confederation. It was the big political organization that controlled most of the galaxy, made up of the older and more powerful alien species. Humanity had tried to join several times, but their applications had been politely ignored. The message was clear. Humans were too young, too weak, too primitive to sit at the big table. Why would Confederation members be looking for refuge here? She wondered aloud. We are not exactly a major power. Maybe that is exactly why they came here, Torres suggested. If they are running from something, they might want to hide somewhere no one would think to look. It made sense, but it also made Sarah nervous. If the Kethmari were hiding from something, that something might eventually come looking for them. And if it found them on Earth, humanity could end up in the middle of someone else's war. "Ma'am," Park said, "they are requesting permission to send a small ship to Luna Station. They want to meet with our representatives." Sarah considered her options. She could tell them to go away, but that seemed cruel if they really were refugees. She could contact Earth's government and wait for instructions, but that would take hours, and the alien ships looked like they might not have hours to spare. Or she could take a chance and see what they wanted. Grant permission for one ship. She decided. Small escort only, no weapons active. Dock them in Bay 7 and have security teams standing by. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the station's main conference room, waiting to meet humanity's unexpected guests. She had changed into her dress uniform and brought along Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the station's chief xenobiologist, and Ambassador James Rodriguez, Earth's most experienced diplomat when it came to alien cultures. The airlock hissed open, and the Kethmari delegation entered. Sarah had to work hard not to stare. She had met aliens before, but never any quite like these. They were tall and thin, almost delicate-looking, with pale skin that seemed to glow slightly in the station's artificial light. Through their translucent skin, she could see the blue lines of their blood vessels. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with a grace that made Sarah think of dancers or birds. The leader of the group stepped forward. She was wearing what looked like a military uniform, though it was unlike any military design Sarah had ever seen. It seemed to be made of some kind of living fabric that shifted color as she moved. "I am Commander Zethra of the Kethmari fleet," the alien said through a small translation device. Her voice was soft but clear. Thank you for allowing us to come aboard your station. I am Admiral Sarah Chun, Sarah replied. Welcome to Luna Station. I understand you are seeking sanctuary? Zethra's large eyes dimmed slightly, and Sarah got the impression this was how her species showed sadness. Yes, Admiral. My people are in desperate need of help. Our homeworld is dying, and the Galactic Confederation has abandoned us. We have nowhere else to go. Sarah gestured for everyone to sit around the conference table. Tell me what happened. The story that came out was heartbreaking. The Kethmari sun was dying, burning through its fuel faster than anyone had predicted. Their planet would be uninhabitable within months. They had asked the Confederation for help with evacuation, for ships and supplies, and temporary homes on other worlds. But the Confederation had decided the Kethmari were not worth saving. They said we were too weak to contribute to galactic defense, Zethra explained. We do not have great armies or powerful weapons. We are scientists and artists and philosophers. To them, that makes us useless. Dr. Warren leaned forward. How many of your people are out there? 12 billion, Zethra said quietly. We managed to evacuate about 3 billion before our resources ran out. The rest ... She did not finish the sentence. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. 9 billion people left behind to die because their government had decided they were not useful enough to save. It was monstrous, but she had heard similar stories before. The galaxy was a harsh place, and compassion was apparently not a common trait among the advanced species. Why did you come to Earth? Ambassador Rodriguez asked. No offense, but we are not exactly known for our resources or military power. Zethra reached into her uniform and pulled out a small crystal tube. She placed it on the table and touched it gently. A holographic image appeared above the crystal, showing what looked like an ancient star map. Thousands of years ago, my people were explorers, she said. We visited many worlds, including yours. The explorer who came to Earth wrote something in his report that has stayed in our archives all this time. The hologram shifted, showing lines of alien text. The translation device worked for a moment, then displayed the words in English on a nearby screen. The humans possess something rare in the galaxy, Sarah read aloud. They have compassion for those who cannot help themselves. They will risk their own safety to aid strangers. If any species in the galaxy might help those who have nowhere else to turn, it would be them. The room fell silent. Sarah stared at the ancient words, written by an alien who had visited Earth when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Somehow, even back then, they had seen something in humanity that the rest of the galaxy seemed to have missed. You came all this way based on a report that is thousands of years old? Dr. Warren asked. It was all we had, Zethra replied. The Confederation species help only those who can help them in return. But the old explorer wrote that humans were different, that they helped others simply because it was right to do so. She looked directly at Sarah. Were we wrong to hope? Sarah looked around the table at her colleagues. She could see the same thoughts in their eyes. 12 billion refugees. It was an impossible number. Earth barely had 8 billion people of its own. How could they possibly help that many aliens? Where would they live? What would they eat? How would two completely different species learn to coexist? But then she thought about the 9 billion Kethmari who had been left behind to die because their own government had decided they were worthless. She thought about the desperate journey these refugees had made, crossing the galaxy on damaged ships, because an ancient explorer had written that humans might care enough to help. You were not wrong, Sarah said finally. We will help you. I do not know how yet, but we will find a way. For the first time since entering the room, Zethra's eyes brightened. It was like watching the sun come up. Thank you, Admiral, she whispered. Thank you for proving that the old stories were true. Dr. Marcus Webb had studied alien biology for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what was happening in Lab 7. The Kethmari, scientists floating across from him, had just solved a problem that human physicists had been working on for decades, and she had done it in her head while eating lunch. You are certain about these calculations? Marcus asked, staring at the equations that covered the lab's wall display. The math was so complex that the computer had needed 3 attempts just to render all the symbols correctly. Dr. Silenai nodded. Her large dark eyes, bright with what Marcus had learned, was excitement among her people. The dark energy flows are actually quite simple once you understand the underlying patterns. Your scientists have been trying to force them into straight lines, but dark energy prefers to spiral. Simple, Marcus almost laughed. The Kethmari had been on Luna Station for only 2 weeks, and they were already revolutionizing human understanding of physics. And Dr. Silenai was just one of dozens of Kethmari, scientists who had volunteered to work with the human research teams, while their people waited for a more permanent solution to the refugee crisis. Marcus watched as Silenai gestured with her long, delicate fingers, and the wall display changed to show a 3-dimensional model of space-time. Where human scientists saw empty darkness between stars, she saw rivers of energy flowing in complex patterns. Her people had learned to read these patterns the way humans read weather maps. If we adjust the quantum field generators according to this flow, Silenai continued, we should be able to create a stable communication channel that works instantly across any distance. Instant communication across the galaxy. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Do you know what this means? He wanted to shout. This technology could change everything for humanity. They would no longer be isolated on the edge of galactic civilization. They could talk to anyone, anywhere, in real time. But as he watched Silenai work, Marcus realized something that made his excitement turn into something deeper. The Kethmari were not trying to trade this knowledge for sanctuary. They were not demanding payment or special treatment. They were sharing their most advanced science simply because humans had offered to help them. Dr. Silenai, Marcus said carefully, why are you showing us this? This technology must be worth more than anything we could give you in return. The Kethmari scientist paused in her work and looked at him with those large, expressive eyes. Your people offered to help mine when we had nowhere else to go. You did not ask what we could give you. You did not demand to know our secrets before deciding whether we were worth saving. You simply said yes, because it was the right thing to do. She gestured around the lab, where human and Kethmari scientists worked side by side at various experiments. This is how knowledge should be shared, freely, between friends, to make everyone's life better. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. He had been thinking like most humans did when it came to galactic politics, that every exchange had to be a trade, that help always came with a price. But the Kethmari seemed to operate on completely different principles. They shared knowledge because sharing made everyone stronger. His tablet chimed with an incoming message. Marcus glanced at it and saw it was from Admiral Chun. The message was short but shocking. Report to Conference Room A immediately. We have received communications from 17 other species requesting sanctuary with humanity. 17 other species. Marcus stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Dr. Silenai, I have to go. Please continue your work. As he hurried through the station corridors, Marcus passed groups of Kethmari refugees working alongside human engineers and scientists. In just 2 weeks, they had integrated into the station's daily operations so smoothly that it was hard to remember what things had been like before they arrived. Children from both species played together in the recreation areas, learning each other's languages and games. Adults shared meals and stories and knowledge. The conference room was packed when Marcus arrived. Admiral Chun stood at the front, looking tired but determined. Around the table sat representatives from various Earth governments, military leaders, and scientists. The wall display showed a star map with dozens of blinking lights. Each of those lights represents a species that has contacted us in the past week, Admiral Chun said. They are all refugees or outcasts from the Galactic Confederation. Word has spread that humanity is willing to help those who have nowhere else to go. General Morrison, Earth's military commander, looked skeptical. Admiral, we can barely handle the 3 billion Kethmari we have already agreed to help. How can we possibly take on more refugees? That is exactly what I wanted to discuss, Chun replied. She touched a control, and the display changed to show reports from human colonies throughout their small section of space. I have been receiving some very interesting messages from our outer settlements. The reports were indeed interesting. Human colonies that had struggled for years to establish themselves were suddenly thriving. Agricultural worlds that had barely been able to feed their own populations were reporting surplus crops. Mining operations that had been economically marginal were now highly profitable. Research stations were making breakthrough discoveries almost daily. What changed? Asked Dr. Martinez. Earth Science Advisor Chun smiled grimly. The colonies started taking in refugees. Small groups at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Species that the Confederation had written off as useless or weak. And it turns out that what the Confederation considers useless is actually incredibly valuable. She brought up a specific report from New Terra, one of humanity's agricultural colonies. The Velthar refugees have a natural ability to sense soil chemistry. They have helped increase crop yields by 40%. The Morkan refugees can communicate with the colony's automated systems in ways our programmers never imagined. The Yithani refugees understand weather patterns so well they can predict storms weeks in advance. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. The Confederation only values military strength and political power. They ignore any species that cannot contribute to their wars or their empire building. Exactly, Chun said. But humans value different things. We see the potential in what others call weakness. And these refugee species are grateful for our help. They are sharing their knowledge and abilities freely because we treated them with respect and compassion. General Morrison was still frowning. This is all very inspiring, Admiral, but we are talking about billions of beings. The logistics alone are impossible. Where will they live? What will they eat? How will we transport them? Before Chun could answer, the conference room door opened and Commander Zethra entered, accompanied by several other Kethmari. She moved to the front of the room with that graceful flow that Marcus had noticed in all her people. Forgive the interruption, Zethra said, but we may have solutions to some of your concerns. She gestured, and one of her companions activated a small device. A holographic display appeared above the conference table, showing what looked like a space station. But unlike any design Marcus had ever seen, this is a Kethmari habitat construction, Zethra explained. We can build living spaces in the asteroid fields of your outer system. Each habitat can house 10 million beings comfortably, with full life support, agriculture, and manufacturing capabilities. The hologram rotated, showing the internal structure of the proposed habitat. It was beautiful and efficient, with living areas that seemed to grow organically from the station's core. Gardens and water features were integrated throughout the design, making it look more like a floating city than a space station. The construction time? General Morrison asked. 6 months for the first habitat, using Kethmari technology and human raw materials, Zethra replied. Once the first is complete, we can build additional habitats much faster. We estimate we could house all the refugee species within 2 years. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. What would you need from us? asteroid mining rights, and basic materials. Sethra said, "In return, we will share our construction technology, our agricultural techniques, and our scientific knowledge. We will also provide defense capabilities that should protect both our peoples from any future threats." Marcus realized he was holding his breath. The Kethmari were not just asking for help, they were offering to transform humanity's entire civilization. Access to their technology would advance human science by centuries. Their construction techniques could give humanity a presence throughout the solar system. Their knowledge could solve problems that humans did not even know they had, and they were offering all of this simply because humans had been willing to help when they had nowhere else to go. Admiral Chun looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person present. The question before us is simple. Do we have the courage to be what the galaxy thinks we are? Do we have the strength to help those who cannot help themselves? Marcus thought about Dr. Silenai working in Lab 7, sharing knowledge that could revolutionize human science. He thought about the reports from the colonies, where desperate refugees had become valued partners and friends. He thought about the old Kethmari explorer, who had written that humans possessed something rare in the galaxy. The emergency alert woke Admiral Chun at 3 a.m, ship time. The message was short, but terrifying. Fanic Empire fleet movements detected. Multiple worlds under attack. Galactic Confederation in collapse. Sarah rolled out of bed and grabbed her uniform, her mind already racing. The Fanic Empire was the military backbone of the Galactic Confederation, a species of warriors who had conquered half the galaxy through pure force. If they were attacking Confederation worlds, it meant the political alliance that had controlled galactic civilization for thousands of years was falling apart. She reached the command center to find it buzzing with activity. Lieutenant Torres met her at the door, his face grim. "Admiral, it's bad. Really bad. We're getting distress signals from dozens of systems. The Fanic have declared something they call the Great Purification." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Purification? Of what? Weak species, ma'am. According to their broadcasts, they're destroying any world that houses what they call evolutionary failures. They say the galaxy needs to be cleansed of inferior races. The main display showed a real-time map of the galaxy with red markers, pairing faster than Sarah could count them. Each marker represented a world under attack, a civilization being wiped out because the Fanic had decided it was not strong enough to deserve existence. How many species are we talking about? Sarah asked. Communications Officer Park looked up from his station. "At least 40 confirmed targets, Admiral. Maybe more. The Fanic are moving fast and hitting multiple systems at once." Sarah studied the tactical display, trying to understand the scope of what was happening. The Fanic had apparently been planning this for years, building up their fleets while the rest of the Confederation had grown comfortable and lazy. Now they were striking everywhere at once, too fast for any organized resistance. "What about the other Confederation members?" she asked. "The Aldari Council? The Zephyrian Empire? Surely they're fighting back?" Torres shook his head. "That's the worst part, Admiral. Some of them have joined the Fanic. The ones that haven't are either running or trying to negotiate. No one is standing up to fight." The communications board lit up with incoming messages. Park worked frantically to sort through them, his face growing more horrified with each transmission he decoded. "Admiral," he said quietly, "we're getting requests for sanctuary. Lots of them. Refugee fleets from the attacked worlds are asking for permission to come to Earth." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the galaxy settling on her shoulders. In just a few months, Earth had gone from being an insignificant backwater world to being the only place in the galaxy where threatened species could find safety. How had this happened? But she knew the answer. It had happened because humanity had chosen compassion over conquest, cooperation over competition. While the great powers of the galaxy had been playing political games and building armies, humans had been quietly helping anyone who needed it. Now, when the galaxy was falling apart, Earth was the only safe harbor left. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked. Park consulted his displays. "Hundreds, Admiral. Maybe thousands. Refugee fleets from species we've never even heard of. They're all heading toward our space." Commander Zethra appeared in the doorway, moving with the swift grace that meant her people were under stress. Behind her came several other Kethmari, including Dr. Silanai and the military advisor Velkar. "Admiral Chun," Zethra said, "we have been monitoring the galactic communications. The situation is worse than your reports indicate." She gestured to Velkar, who activated a portable holographic display. The image that appeared made everyone in the room fall silent. It showed a Thenic battle fleet in action, massive ships with dark hulls and weapons that could crack planets. Below them, a world burned. "This was the Moralian homeworld," Zethra said quietly. "Population 8 billion. The Thanic destroyed it completely 6 hours ago. No survivors." Sarah felt sick. 8 billion people, wiped out in a single attack. Why? What threat could the Moralians have possibly posed? "None," Velkar replied, his usually calm voice tight with anger. "The Moralians were artists and musicians. Their greatest weapons were poetry and song. But the Thanic declared them weak. And weakness is now a crime punishable by extinction." Dr. Silanai stepped forward, her eyes bright with urgency. "Admiral, we must tell you something important. The refugee fleets are not just running randomly. They are coordinating their movements, sharing information, working together. Your human colonies have become rally points where different species can meet and plan." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Rally points for what?" "Resistance," Zethra said. "Simply, the species that the Confederation abandoned are forming an alliance. They are calling it the Terran Accord, named after your world. And they want to fight back." The idea was so unexpected that Sarah had to sit down. Earth, which had never been able to get the Confederation's attention, was now the center of a galactic resistance movement. Species that had been written off as weak and useless were uniting under humanity's banner. "What kind of resistance?" General Morrison asked, entering the command center with several other Earth officials. "We're talking about the Thanic Empire here. They have the most powerful military in the galaxy." Velkar touched his display controls, and the hologram changed to show a different kind of space battle. This one showed smaller ships using hit-and-run tactics against a massive Thanic fleet. The smaller ships moved in patterns that seemed almost like a dance, appearing suddenly to strike and then vanishing before the enemy could respond. "The refugee species may not have large armies," Velkar explained, "but they have abilities the Thanic do not understand. The Silanathi can hack into any computer system. The Mordek can make biological weapons that target specific genetic markers. The Yithron can manipulate gravity fields to hide entire fleets." Sarah began to see the picture. The Thanic are used to fighting opponents who use the same tactics they do. Big fleets, direct confrontation, brute force. "Exactly," Zethra confirmed. "But the refugee species fight differently. They use intelligence instead of strength, cooperation instead of conquest. And they have something the Thanic do not expect, which is, they have nothing left to lose," Dr. Silanai said. "Their worlds are destroyed. Their families are dead. Their governments have abandoned them. They are willing to take risks that military commanders would never consider." General Morrison studied the tactical displays. "What kind of military support are we talking about? How many ships?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The main communications board lit up with an incoming transmission marked with maximum priority. Park worked to decode it, then looked up with amazement. "Admiral, it's from Captain Elizabeth Santos of the merchant vessel New Horizon. She says she's commanding a fleet of 800 ships from 37 different species, and they're requesting permission to use Earth space as a staging area for military operations. 800 ships." Sarah tried to process the number. Earth's entire space fleet consisted of maybe 50 vessels, most of them barely armed. But somehow, humanity had become the rallying point for a force that dwarfed anything they had ever imagined. "Put Captain Santos on the main screen," Sarah ordered. The display flickered, then showed the bridge of a ship that Sarah didn't recognize. The design was clearly human, but it had been modified with technology from a dozen different species. Standing at the center of the bridge was a woman Sarah knew, Captain. Santos had been a cargo hauler who had volunteered to help transport Kethmari refugees to the outer colonies. "Admiral Chun," Santos said with a tired smile, "I have to report that my shipping company has apparently become a military force. We've got refugee fleets from all over the galaxy linking up with us. They want to fight back against the Thanik, and they want to do it under human leadership." "Under human leadership?" Sarah repeated. "Captain, we don't have any military experience with galactic warfare." Santos laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Admiral, with respect, that's exactly why they want us to lead. Every other species in the galaxy thinks in terms of conquest and domination. They fight to win territory or resources or power, but humans fight for different reasons." "What reasons?" General Morrison asked. "We fight to protect people," Santos replied. "We fight because it's the right thing to do. These refugee species have seen how we operate. They've seen that we help others without expecting anything in return. They trust us in a way they could never trust the Confederation species." Sarah looked around the command center, seeing the faces of her officers and the Kethmari advisors. Just a few months ago, they had been worried about housing 3 billion refugees. Now they were being asked to lead a galactic war against the most powerful military force in known space. But as she watched, she saw something in their expressions that gave her hope. They were not afraid. They were angry. Angry at the injustice of what was happening. Angry at the senseless slaughter of innocent beings. Angry at a galaxy that had decided weakness was a crime. "Captain Santos," Sarah said, "bring your fleet to Sol System. We'll coordinate with the refugee ships and see what we can do." The Thanik war fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system like a storm of metal and death. Admiral Chun watched from Luna Station as her sensors counted the enemy ships, over 2,000 vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever built. The flagship alone was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "The Thanik commander is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's demanding the immediate surrender of all refugee fleets and the dissolution of what he calls our illegal alliance." Sarah studied the tactical display, where the massive Thanik fleet was arranged in perfect formation. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat, who had conquered half the galaxy through pure force. But scattered around the solar system, hidden among asteroids and behind planets, were 800 ships from 37 different species. The Terran Accord fleet looked tiny compared to the Thanik armada. "Open a channel," Sarah ordered. "Let's hear what they have to say." The main screen flickered, then showed the bridge of the Thanik flagship. The alien who appeared was exactly what Sarah had expected. Tall, heavily muscled, covered in dark scales that looked like natural armor. His eyes were cold and predatory, the eyes of a creature that saw other beings as either useful or disposable. "I am War Commander Grake Thill of the Thanik Empire," the alien announced. "You will surrender the weak species you harbor and submit to Thanek authority. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your primitive world. Sarah stood up slowly, meeting the war commander's gaze without flinching. I am Admiral Sarah Chon of Earth. The beings you call weak are under our protection. If you want to harm them, you'll have to go through us first. Greakthal's expression showed something that might have been amusement. You are willing to die for creatures that can contribute nothing to galactic strength? Your species is even more foolish than we believed. Maybe, Sarah replied. But we're the kind of foolish that stands up to bullies. You can leave our space peacefully, or you can find out what happens when you threaten people we care about. The Thanek commander's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. Your entire fleet could not scratch the hull of my flagship. You have no weapons that can harm us, no technology that can match ours. Surrender now, and we will grant your species a quick death. Sarah smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even the predatory Thanek look uncertain. War Commander, you've spent so long fighting species that think like you do that you've forgotten there are other ways to be strong. Let me show you what we've learned from our friends. She gestured to Commander Zethra, who was standing at the tactical station. The Kethmari commander touched her controls, and space around Earth began to shimmer. What sorcery is this? Greathal demanded, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Not sorcery, Sarah replied. Science. The Kethmari can manipulate dark energy fields. Right now, they're creating a barrier around every inhabited world in our system. Your weapons won't be able to penetrate it. The Thanek fleet immediately opened fire. Lance beams and plasma cannons that could melt mountains, striking the invisible barriers around Earth and its colonies. The energy simply vanished, absorbed and redirected by the quantum fields that the Kethmari had woven through space itself. Greakthal's eyes widened as his most powerful weapons proved useless. Impossible. No species has mastered dark energy manipulation to this degree. The Kethmari have, Sarah said calmly. You dismissed them as weak because they chose science over warfare. That was your first mistake. The war commander snarled and began issuing orders to his fleet. The Thanek ships spread out, trying to find weak points in the defensive barriers. But as they moved, other things began to happen. Ships began disappearing from the Thanek fleet. Not destroyed, simply gone, vanishing without a trace. Greathal spun around, demanding reports from his subordinates. The Yithran refugees can bend gravity, Sarah explained conversationally. They're creating small black holes that transport your ships to empty space thousands of light years away. Don't worry, your crews will survive. They'll just have a very long trip home. More Thanek vessels vanished. The perfect formation of the Imperial fleet began to break apart as commanders tried to avoid an enemy they could not see or understand. Then the real chaos began. Throughout the Thanek fleet, ships began turning their weapons on each other. Greathal watched in horror as his own vessels started fighting among themselves. The Silanathi were computer programmers before you destroyed their world, Sarah said. They've been hacking your ship systems since the moment you entered our space. Right now, your crews are seeing false targets on their sensors. They think they're shooting at us, but they're actually shooting at each other. The Thanek war commander was no longer laughing. His massive fleet was tearing itself apart, victims of technologies and tactics they had never encountered. But Sarah was not done. Captain Santos, she said into her communicator, you're clear to begin Phase 3. Throughout the solar system, the refugee fleet began to move. But they were not attacking the Thanek ships. Instead, they were doing something far more devastating to a warrior culture. They were rescuing them. More Deke medical ships moved toward damaged Thanek vessels, their doctors working to save the lives of beings who had come to destroy them. Velther engineers used their abilities to repair critical systems on Fennec ships that were in danger of exploding. Kethmari scientists created safe corridors through space for Thonic escape pods. "What are you doing?" Breakthal demanded, his voice filled with confusion and rage. "Why are you saving our warriors?" Sarah looked directly into the alien's predatory eyes. "Because that's what we do. We save people, even people who want to hurt us, even people who think we're weak and worthless. We save them because every life has value." For the first time since the battle began, the Fennec war commander was silent. Around his flagship, his mighty fleet was in ruins, not destroyed, but defeated by mercy. His warriors were being rescued by the very beings they had come to exterminate. Dr. Silenai appeared on the Luna Station bridge, her eyes bright with urgent purpose. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from over half the Fennec fleet. Their commanders want to talk." Sarah nodded. "Open channels to all Fennec vessels. This is Admiral Chun to all Fennec forces. Your war commander led you here to destroy what he called weak species. But you've seen what those species can do when they work together. You've seen their technology, their abilities, their willingness to help even their enemies." She paused, letting her words sink in across the fleet. "The old galaxy is dead. The confederation that valued only strength and conquest has collapsed, but we're building something new. A galaxy where every species has value, where different abilities are celebrated instead of feared. You can be part of that future, or you can continue following leaders who see other beings as disposable." One by one, Fennec ships began powering down their weapons. The mighty Imperial fleet that had terrorized the galaxy was surrendering to a force they could not understand, compassion backed by the united strength of those who had been forgotten. War Commander Greg Thel stared at his tactical displays, watching his fleet abandon him. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The strong rule the weak. That is the natural order." "No," Sarah said gently. "The strong protect the weak. That's the natural order. Everything else is just bullying." 6 months later, Commander Zethra stood in the observation deck of New Velthera, the first Kethmari habitat constructed in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Through the transparent walls, she could see Earth hanging in the distance like a blue jewel, surrounded by dozens of similar habitats housing refugees from across the galaxy. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb was teaching a mixed class of human and alien children about quantum physics. The students included young Kethmari with their luminous eyes, Silanathi with their crystalline skin, Mordek whose fur changed color with their emotions, and human children who asked questions that made even the advanced alien scientists think. Aunt Zethra, one of the human children, called out in perfect Kethmari, "When will the new refugees arrive?" Zethra smiled. The latest group was from the former Thonic Empire, species that had been enslaved by the warriors for generations, and were finally free to join the growing alliance. "Tomorrow, little one, and we'll be ready to welcome them." The child nodded seriously, then went back to playing with her Kethmari friend. They were building something with blocks that seemed to defy gravity, a trick they had learned from the Yithrian refugees. "Admiral," Chun's voice came over the habitat's communication system. "All residents, this is Admiral Chun with today's report. I'm pleased to announce that the Terran Alliance now includes 143 species from across the galaxy. Construction has begun on 50 new habitats, and are agricultural. Worlds are reporting surplus food production, sufficient to feed everyone." Zethra listened as the Admiral continued with updates about medical breakthroughs, scientific discoveries, and cultural exchanges. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and conquest was being transformed by cooperation and mutual aid.